Goldayan. Hey everyone, it's Eric and it's time for the Icelandic thing of the day. Today we are talking about Viðtenningarhatur, or the subjunctive. Let's call it the subjunctive. So if you're not familiar with this concept, the subjunctive is a different mood for verbs in Icelandic and other Germanic languages. Like so many things, we don't really have it in English anymore. We used to, but most of its work has been shipped out to cheaper syntactic labor. And so we only have a few examples of the subjunctive still present in English. Most of its forms are now identical with the standard form, which is called the indicative. So basically the indicative, it indicates, it tells you about things that are real, that are factual. The subjunctive is more for things that are in doubt, things that take place in imaginary or possible worlds, which makes it sound a lot more like science fiction than it really is. Here's an example that I think encapsulates it pretty well. So if I say, I was at Clytemnestra's last night until 2 a.m., that's indicative. That's where I was over at Cly's house. If I say, if I were at Clytemnestra's until 2 a.m., I certainly wouldn't tell you. I'm implying that I wasn't at Cly's house, and but I am positing that idea as a fictional world. You note that I said I was in the indicative and I were in the subjunctive. So that's one example. There are others in English, but they're pretty rare. There's a whole other class, a whole other tense, mood is the word, for this in Icelandic though. And it's used in a couple of different places. It can also be used, it can be used to inject more politeness into a word. As I've mentioned here before, there's no Icelandic word for please, but you can sometimes use the subjunctive in order to be more polite. It conveys that you wish for something to happen, or injects doubt into it. So one example that we talked about today in class, Þú þyrftir að fara í bath, which is the subjunctive. Þurfa is need, so this is, you maybe need to take a bath. Maybe, couldn't hurt. Whereas if you were to use the indicative form, it would just be, you need to take a bath. For serious. That is a fact. That's not an imaginary story, that's not a possible world. You need to take a bath, son. And another use that's pretty common that I think is really interesting, actually, is that in reported speech, you use the subjunctive. By which I mean, well, I'll use the example that Jon Simon used in class today. Afi segir, Nonni góður strákur. That last part's in quotation marks. So Grandpa says that Nonni is a good boy. That's a direct quote. Nonni góður strákur. That's what Grandpa said. But if you're just doing reported speech, if you're not doing a direct quote, then it's Afi segir að Nonni sé góður strákur. That A, anyway. So it's not a direct quote. You're relating you're relating the sense of what Grandpa says, but are these his exact words? No. So it's in the subjunctive. And I think that this reminds me a lot of English, the newer construction of like in English, where we'll say something like, she was like, I'm going to go to the mall. Did she say specifically, I'm going to go to the mall? Was that an exact quote? Who knows? But that's the sense of it. And so you can convey dialogue without necessarily having to imply that you are saying exactly an exact quote. So there are two tenses of subjunctive in Icelandic. We could call them present and past, but they don't exactly work that way. They do match up with the present and the past, and they're derived from the present and the past, but it's not quite the same thing. It's been proposed to call them 1 and 2, which, since the name of this, since the Icelandic name for subjunctive is Viðtenningur hatur, it's VH1 and VH2. Listen to Madonna while you're doing this. The good news is that VH1 is actually quite easy to do. All you do is you take the infinitive, you get the stem of it, so before endings, and then you add on a series of quite regular endings. Aftala, to talk. The subjunctive form is just tali, talir, tali, tolam, talith, tali, and that's for all verbs. You just break off that stem from the beginning, and then you add I and some other things. Quite simple. Even for verbs that normally involve vowel changes in the present tense, which would be classes 3 through 5, they all just, you take the infinitive, add I, and add some I endings. Very simple. Which also means that that often some of the plurals look just like the indicative forms. Now, the past tense of the subjunctive. Crazy! Here's what you have to do in order to form the past tense of the subjunctive. Present tense, real easy. VH1, nothing to it. Bad news, they never use it. It's only used in fixed phrases, and occasionally in this reported speech thing, but the vast majority of the time you have to use the past tense form, VH2, which is nuts. Here's how you do it. First off, you have to, so this is all for strong nouns, for strong verbs. For the weak verbs, it's pretty simple. They actually look exactly the same as the past indicative. So, kaladi, kaladir, kaladi. If you know how to do the past tense in the indicative, you know how to do it in the subjunctive. They look the exact same way, and you can't tell the difference between the two of them except for context. For the strong verbs, so these are the ones who form their past tense through an ablaut series. So you have to look up the ablaut series. You have to find the past plural form, and that forms your stem. So let's look at aftorepa, which means to kill, because that's what you're going to want to do after you've studied this. So aftorepa belongs to the ablaut series of ie in the infinitive, a in the singular past, au in the plural past, and e in the past participle. So that means that you're looking for dropum, dropum, which is the past plural form. Then you have to do I umlaut alteration on it, right? So, just to be clear, in order to find out what this is, you have to find the verb in the infinitive, then you have to do a series of vowel changes to it to find it in the past plural, then you have to do another vowel change to it in order to find it in the subjunctive. So, in this case, au turns into I, that's ae, ash, and that gives you your stem. Then you can add some endings, drypi, drypir, drypi, drypum, dryputh, drypu, and that is the past subjunctive. So, ablaut series, 2 different vowel shifts, and that's the one that they use all the time. I have compiled all this information into a handy chart which you can use for screenshots. Ugh, this is going to be the death of me. Sjálfst.